What is your name?
Fleur.
Fleur. So has Fleur. Let me ask you a simple question, okay? If you're at war with Gaza, why are you shooting children in the skull and in the chest? The New York Times published an article on that, came under a lot of flack because they published that article. They said we can't refute the evidence. We have the x-rays in front of us. They're shooting children in the head, in the skull, and in the chest.
Hey everybody, welcome back to part 2 of 3 in this explosive discussion. Piers Morgan is pushed to confront some hard truths about Gaza-Israel conflict, featuring a fiery exchange with Normal Finkelstein and Fleur Hassan. Both guests come in hot. Finkelstein meticulously dismantles Israel's policies towards Gaza, while Fleur, caught in the defense, struggles to justify long-standing narratives. The debate oscillates between historical context and pressing human rights concerns, but make no mistakes, Finkelstein dominates the conversation with pointed arguments that leaves Fleur grappling for solid ground. If you thought Piers Morgan might stick to his usual skepticism, think again. As the discussion unfolds, he shows signs of shifting perspective, especially under the weight of unrefutable evidence. This isn't your typical back and forth. It's a high-stake clash of ideologies, facts, and moral reckoning. Let's dive in, break down the arguments, and see if Piers has finally accepted the truth.
If you're engaged in the war in Gaza, why are you killing journalists? Why are you killing medics? Why are you killing UN workers? If you're engaged in the war with Hamas, why is it that Human Rights Watch just this past week put out a report? They tell people where to flee. They say, go to the safe zones. Human Rights Watch says, when the people are directed, they're being shot at the road.
But aren't you seriously saying, but hang on. Let me respond.
When you get to the safe areas.
I understand. I've already made that point.
Israel drops 2,000-pound bombs.
I've made that very point.
Does that sound like a war?
No, I've made it more.
Or does that sound like a genocide?
It's interesting. Okay, let's get into that because it's an interesting part of the debate.
Finkelstein doesn't mince words here, escalating the stakes of debate. His explicit framing of targeting safe zones as genocide is a rhetorical masterstroke. It's both shocking and impossible to dismiss casually. Fleur's counter, arguing Israel is targeting Hamas, rings hollow in this context because it ignores the established reports of civilian casualties and rock attacks. Piers' inability to challenge this effectively signals that the narrative is slipping from his control.
It's horrendous that UN workers, journalists, children, women have all been killed. It's horrendous.
Targeted.
Well,
Targeted.
They quibble with the word targeted. They say it's collateral damage as they've gone after terrorists.
When you
Here's my question, Norman. Norman, here's my question.
Skull, that's
Norman,
not collateral.
Norman, can you tell me any war where innocent people have not been killed in large numbers?
I'm not talking about innocent people. This is not.
He's talking about Hamas terror.
This is not collateral damage. This is not even indiscriminate killing. This is very discriminate killing. It's indiscriminate bombing of the entire infrastructure.
If they wanted genocide, though, why don't they just kill everyone in Gaza?
There's a very simple
maybe
answer.
you let me answer.
I'm going to come to that.
There's a very simple answer to that question, Piers, because I know you're not allowed to say it, but since I know the topic very well, take the case of the Nazis. The Nazis needed the cover of a war in order to carry out the final solution. Now, Hitler had plans earlier on, but it required a certain amount of cover, propaganda, and all sorts of other devices in order to carry it out. Gaza is in the news. It's very hard.
Do you believe Israel had a right to defend itself after October the 7th?
Actually, if you want to hear my full answer, I'm not giving you a yes or no.
What's the short answer?
He
doesn't have a short answer.
That's correct. I don't have short answers. I've said it to you before. In my opinion, Israel, here it's not my opinion, I'll quote Giora Eiland, Israel, the former head of Israel's National Security Council. Israel created, I'm quoting him now, in 2004, he said Gaza is, quote, a huge concentration camp. Israel created a huge concentration camp in Gaza. Israel imposed a medieval blockade on Gaza, which has been characterized as a crime against humanity. Israel periodically went into Gaza on its high-tech killing sprees, what it called operations. I would say Israel created, I think I'm quoting now, a British economist called Gaza a toxic dump. Israel created a situation where you have children.
Yeah.
I understand. How old are your children?
From 31 down to 12. 13.
Okay, fine. Imagine if your child, you're a father, your child was born into what Isra4l called a concentration camp. Your child was left to languish in that concentration
It sounds
camp.
like you're working out a justification.
Allow me
To justify low charges, but maybe if you let him somebody get a I could explain where he's coming
Okay,
from.
allow me to finish.
I do need to bring Fleur in, though.
I need your
If this is not, yes, you do.
but she's a-
You need a psycho.
She does need to respond.
I'm lunatics.
If there was this
Well, she probably thinks you're a lunatic too.
Okay,
something.
And by October 7th, as you recall, Gaza had disappeared from the international stage.
Yeah.
All the talk was about Abraham Accords, whether Saudi Arabia. So your child was destined to be born into languishing and die in a concentration camp. Israel created those conditions.
So was it justified?
My view is Israel forfeited its right of self-defense
Okay.
based on its criminal abuse of the population of Gaza for 20 years.
Okay. But so
This is where Finkelstein makes his most controversial claim, and it lands like a thundercloud. By tying Israel's action directly to the international law and historical abuses, he builds a case that undermines the very premise of Israel's self-defense. The mention of Gaza as a concentration camp is a deliberate provocation, forcing Fleur to respond defensively instead of controlling the narrative. The moment encapsulates the unbalanced power dynamic of the debate. Finkelstein brings hard-hitting evidence, while Fleur leans on emotional appeals that fail to land.
just to extrapolate that, it was just
I'm very clear. There's no need for extrapolation. Israel forfeited its right to self-defense.
does that mean then that what happened was justified?
I will stick by my formulation. Israel forfeited its right to self-defense by having...
But what Hamas justified by your logic?
Was Hamas justified if your children were in that situation? I suspect as a final resort, they might very well have done what happened.
So
You've
then,
gone-
by his logic, there's 100 children in tunnels and dungeons in Gaza right now, taken, innocent people, not soldiers, taken hostage. If it was your child, then it justifies everything by his very logic. By his very logic, somebody takes away your children.
All right, let her respond.
We've had
No,
enough.
but let her respond. I gave you a long
Okay.
time.
First of all, let's just come back from Gotham.
Well, hang on. Your response to what? Because Norman's gone as far as I've heard him do in effectively saying it was a justified attack, and Israel has no right to defend itself.
self-defense. So of course he's going to say that because he doesn't believe Israel has a right to exist.
Document where I said
Could you let me answer my question?
Show me where I said
that Israel has a right
Has he
to
ever
exist.
said that?
If Israel,
Has he ever said that?
my question is this:
Well, you just said he said that.
if Israel doesn't have the right to self-defense, then it doesn't have the right to exist.
Fleur.
He's never said that.
Again, just
The right to self-defense, it doesn't have a right to exist. I mean, the whole of the country is a settlement.
Fine.
You've said it, you've implied it, you're wondering enough. If you let me answer the question. Let me answer the question. You know?
Where did I say Israel had no right to exist? Show me.
Can I
I've
answer the
written
question?
10 books.
I think you should answer him because you have said it as a fact.
If you believe that Israel doesn't have the right of self-defense, you are basically saying that Israel doesn't have the right to exist.
No, I never.
Yes, you do. So then we can exist, but we can't defend ourselves.
You can't.
After people attack us. And let's just go back in history.
You can't defend yourself against concentration camps.
He keeps interrupting me.
Well, what
He just had a 10-minute monologue.
No, I agree. I agree.
He's
Well,
a
let's have a
10-minute
response.
monologue. Give me a 5-minute
Okay.
monologue, okay?
Okay.
Since the beginning of the establishment of the State of Israel, which he believes that we were the terrible people displacing people. Okay, we were also displaced. Jews were also displaced from Arab lands. And that's just what happened post-war, post-colonization of the world. So let's look. In 1947, there was a 2-state solution proposed. The Jews said yes. The Arabs said no. It's not that they wanted a state. It's that they didn't want the Jews to have a state. So we declared a state in 48. What happens? All the countries around us come to attack, to create a genocide. It was a miracle that Israel wasn't eliminated in that moment. Move forward. 67. Those territories in which we were attacked, there was no Palestine, there was no Palestinians. It was Jordan and Egypt and Syria and Lebanon that attacked Israel. If they would never have attacked Israel in 67, that land would have remained Arab land. Okay, fast forward 73. Another war that we didn't start. Now, do we not have the right to defend ourselves? We didn't start 67. We didn't start 73. We didn't start. Then we go and we say, we crumble onto hope. We hold on to hope. We say, let's do the Oslo Accords. We offered Arafat, and Clinton will say this himself.
He has.
Everything they said they wanted. 97% of the West Bank, half of Jerusalem, the lot. And they said no, and they started a bloody intifada in the streets of my city that killed many, many innocent civilians, Jewish and Arab alike. Then we thought, let's try something else. In 2005, let's try unilateral withdrawal. That's what Sharon did. He said, if we actually just leave, they'll have an opportunity. There was never a blockade. The blockade started when Hamas went into power, and they were bringing in, contrabanding missiles in which to attack Israel. That's when a country has to say, we need to defend ourselves. Now, if there's a blockade, don't they have a border with Egypt? Why don't you say a word about Egypt? There's no blockade when it's 3 walls. Where's the 4th wall? It's Egypt. What happened to Egypt? Didn't they have tunnels going in and out of Egypt? In fact, it was Egypt that had a much harsher border than Israel. We had 20,000 people coming into work.
And let me ask you a question.
So what concentration?
Let me ask you a question.
Tell me something. What concentration has country club?
Fleur's tone becomes defensive to a point of ridicule. Attempting to minimize Gaza's dire condition with a glib dismissal, it's a colossal misstep. Rather than refuting Finkelstein's argument, she trivializes a humanitarian crisis. The comparison to concentration camps may be inflammatory, but Fleur's weak rebuttal only amplifies the critique. Even Piers seems caught off guard, leading back into sympathy for Finkelstein's position.
What concentration camp was the country club?
No, I would do it.
Go on, concentration. Yes, your island thinks you should keep northern Gaza. That they think. So now you won't.
Your island called a huge concentration camp. Why?
I don't speak.
I mean, you could just
2004. Yes, we went in 2005.
Right. He called down for a huge concentration camp.
We left in 2000.
Let's keep.
We are acting your imagination. Excuse me. Keep your imagination. You understand. According to the international matter of the Red Cross. Yes. No, we know how neutral they are.
Human Rights Watch.
You get it. We know how neutral they are.
It's the international.
We know how neutral.
Everybody's an anti-Semite.
No. But I'm not really, but no.
Let me ask the question.
Why don't you just
let me just get a timeout. No, I want to ask you a question, which is this. There can be no doubt that even if Israel says we unilaterally pulled out in 2005 and withdrew troops and so on to the border or whatever, there's no doubt that Israel continued to exercise a form of occupying control. And we saw that very clearly after October the 7th, when Israel was, at the flick of a switch, able to turn off the supplies of water, of electricity.
Why didn't they develop their own water?
No, but here's my question for you.
Why didn't they use
Here's my question for you. Here's my question for you.
Why?
Here's my question for you. Given that Israel had that power, you can dispute the word occupation, but they had a control over the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, which I don't think they should have had. What gives Israel the right to exercise that kind of power over the people of Gaza?
It wasn't over the people of Gaza. It
was
a terrorist entity that has in its foundational charter the destruction of Israel. And
gave them control.
No, I wouldn't give them control. We gave the Palestinian Authority control.
Are you saying all Gazans are Hamas?
No, we gave the Palestinian Authority control. And then the year later, they had elections pushed by the American government at the time. And then Hamas won that election and then took over in a brutal coup, which, by the way, do you know how many of the PA they killed? This is their own civil war going on.
Listen, I think
Hamas, that's also Israel.
I think Hamas are a
everything. You are basically practicing the bigotry of low expectation. Okay. The Gazans and the Palestinians.
All right, let me...
Part of the Palestinian leadership has no responsibility. Zero responsibility.
okay, listen.
It's a brutal terrorist organization.
Yes,
Okay?
it is.
So that explains why Israel prohibited chocolate from entering Gaza. That's why Israel prohibited baby chicks
But I don't agree with any
from
of this.
Gaza.
I agree with you.
That's why
He's twisting the reality.
Actually, that is the reality.
It's not.
Israel was doing.
It's
Israel
not,
produced
Piers.
such
They were
long-
restricting
such-
building materials that they knew that were
It wasn't all they were restricting. Let me ask you. Listen, I want to bring things forward.
Here's we agree on more than we disagree. I'm glad about
Listen,
that.
you'd be surprised. Honestly, I have a lot of sympathy for the plight of the Palestinians, and I have sympathy
so do
for
I.
Israel to what happened on
I
October
have a
7th.
lot of sympathy for the Palestinians.
Let me-
They've always had terrible leadership.
Fine. You know what I think? Palestinians should be entitled to the exact same human rights as you.
They should
and
be
me.
entitled to their
And
own
they're not.
self-determination.
Yeah. And
Well, why didn't they do that? Why didn't they take one of the pieces?
I agree.
Why did they
I
self-determine?
agree.
No, you know what?
I agree.
Piers,
Answer
because
the
they've
question.
never
My view.
taken responsibility.
Yes, for my.
Because the whole
I'm
world,
talking from
the
own
whole
side.
world has taken
Fleur,
all
my view
responsibility
is
away
this.
from the leadership.
My view is a bigger view, which is that right behind all this is Iran. That
Absolutely.
Iran's tentacles have
Absolutely.
been fueling Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and
Absolutely.
that is the core problem in the region.
In Norman Finkelstein world, Islamism is not a problem. Political Islam is
Let
not a
Norman
problem.
respond now.
In his world, that's not a problem.
It's a very simple answer. There are called 4 or 5 final status questions bearing on resolving the conflict.
Yeah.
Jerusalem, settlements, borders, refugees. Those are the main issues. Under international law, the settlements are illegal.
Mhm.
Each and every one. I noticed yesterday when I was watching your latest program, you referred to the building of new settlements as being appalling. No, under international law, confirmed in the July decision of the International Court of Justice, all the settlements are illegal. Under the plans that Ehud Barak offered in 2000, near 2000, and then later under Ehud Olmert, Israel wanted to keep 80% of the settlements in place. It wanted to keep all the settlement blocks in place. The question of borders, Israel's position has been, it will not return to the June 1967 border. That's in breach of international law.
Okay.
Israel says it will not leave East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. It belongs to the Palestinian people. Very simple, very simple. I hope everybody will listen.
Who are we occupying Jerusalem? It was Jordanian before 67.
Interesting.
No, you're talking about no. I'm sparkling no.
But you cannot dispute on that. Hang on.
Just important.
Okay.
Okay.
You just okay. On one
I
point,
just heard
Fleur, we can argue about the Hang on. We can argue about the history of the settlements. Okay. What I don't think anyone can argue, Israeli or Palestinian, since the start of this war on October the 7th, 8th, is that the aggressive expansion of settlements on the West Bank by Israelis since the start of this war, in my estimation, has not just been outrageous. I think it actually constitutes an indisputable war crime.
This is a huge turning point for Piers Morgan, and it's not subtle. The facts, coupled with Finkelstein's relentless logics, leaves him visibly grappling with his usual stance. Meanwhile, Fleur's inability to provide substantive counters exposes the double standards in defending Israel's policies. The bottom line? This wasn't a debate. It was a reckoning. Finkelstein delivered blow after blow, leaving Fleur failing and forcing Piers to confront the truth behind the Gaza-Israel conflict. If Mr. Morgan doesn't shift his views after this, what more will it take? Part 3 maybe? Stay tuned. Let us know down in the comments what you think. Did Finkelstein's really deliver the blow to Fleur? Catch you on the next one.